Hello and welcome. In this video we're going to go over the client and game server. Right here I have two instances of the client running. You can run it by going to your custom run instances, enabling multiple instances, and then add two, so when you run it you'll get two instances or however many you want. With submit to log in, I have one account already running. This is a simulate a lobby. Go ahead and log in to the second client. I'll show you some error codes we've done. Right now this account is not created. Hit submit, it says account does not exist. So we have to register. Now I've had these automatically filled in just for ease of use. We've got a little server drop down which we're on the Ubuntu 24 server. Submit, creates the account, and automatically logs you in, like we discussed before. Send a text message. Both clients will see it. I've added the ability to block a player. What happens, you hit the block player, this will record it on the database and keep it so that messages are no longer sent to this client from this user. Hit block, wipes it out. Keep testing here. And bam, bam. All right. You can then go to your options. You can remove this player if you want to. You do remove right here. Then this is where we're at on this. Now we'll go through the code. Fortunately, with Ubuntu 24, you cannot run multiple clients at the same time, or I should say multiple editors at the same time, because the first one seemed to crash with some kind of display error. It might be something to do with my VM, the driver, video driver. Unfortunately, VMware has changed. Company was bought out by Broadcom, and now they're on a subscription basis, which I won't do. So in the future, I'll probably be switching to some hardware and remote desktop into that instead. But for now, we'll just do it this way. What I've done is I've created some scripts to launch the servers and keep them running in the back end. Here is a script. Basically, you just do start server project, sh start all, and we'll go through and create a screen. So you'll need to install a screen if you want to use the script. And then you can access each one by its name. Of course, you can tap, open it up, and here you can see the communication of the game server. Control AD to close that window and keep it running, and then you can go on to gateway server if you want to see it. Go. AD again, Control AD, and we'll do all server. There you go. AD to close. Now, I'm not going to go over every single change that I've made in the past few weeks, but if you want to see all of them, you can use a compare. And basically what you do is you go to the repository, GitHub, type in compare, and then the first one is going to be the first hex that you want to compare from. So in this case, we have, this was the last commit here from the last tutorial, and these are all the changes I've made since. And you want to grab the hex put it in the first field here, and actually, I think that's the wrong one. We want to go back all the way here because these were added after I uploaded, or from the last video. So this is from the last video here. I tried to name them the same as the video. I'll probably be a little bit more diligent, and I will start putting the tutorial number in it, like episode 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. I'll rename all the existing videos and put them in order. And anyway, so you copy your SHA basically, and then you go in here to your compare. You put that here in your first spot, and then you have 2 dots, and then you find the last one that you want to compare to, which in this case it's going to be this one here, the 4C. Go here, which is here, and you put that there in that field. So dot and the last SHA. Hit enter, and this is going to be your difference. Make sure you hit the split over here, or if you want unified, it's going to throw in 1, but it's going to be really long. Or if you do split, you're going to be able to compare side to side. And I've made a lot of changes. That's the reason why I'm not going to go through all of them. You can check them out. I did renaming of file structure. I did changes to typecasting, where I got away from doing implicit typing because of this is actually more performant. I thought things like equal colon was good enough, but I've also recently discovered that you actually really want to static type it completely, even on cases of like new, like here. Technically speaking, this is typecasting if you do the colon equal sign and then .new, because it's going to return the type, but this type has to be derived, and instead of searching and finding out what type it is, just implicitly type it, and then it's actually more performant. So I did a lot of things like that since the last episode, so I'm not going to go through all of them. I did do an update of the size of the display name in the varchar. We're going to do 64 character, which is what originally I had in the filter we were using. So all kinds of changes like that, little minor things, renaming stuff to make more sense, etc. All right. There's some code changes here. Did things just a little bit differently, just to make things more efficient. If you have any questions on specifically why I did things, feel free to either ask in the comments or join the Discord, and we can have a discussion of why I did what, where, and when. Most part, I just want to cover in this video the additions we did with the game server and the client. We'll go over those today, and the rest of it, and possibly this may extend to another video. There's a lot that I've done. You see 3,522 additions, deletions, and 182 change files. A lot of work in this past few weeks. Let's get into the code. Let's start with the client. I want to cover some basic topics here. One is RPC. This is a common question on Discord. It comes up about the way RPC works, and so I will cover that now. Basically, what I do is I create my autoloads, and if I have RPCs, I put them in script autoload. I make all RPCs autoload. I know it can get kind of bulky with the autoload, which now they rename to globals, but it's the same thing. And globals is probably more appropriate. They really should have named it singleton, to be honest, but my opinion. Anyhow, and so far we've only added the time-lapse autoload, but these are the RPCs, as you can see. You got a connection interface. This is for connecting to the server. This is for messaging, the messaging we did back and forth. Inventory is empty, not running. We'll work on that. I'm not sure. I want to get the game going, and let's talk about that. I think what we'll do is we're going to make a top-down tower defense game. It's got multiplayer, player versus player capability. We can have one player be tanks and one player be towers. Kind of like what Orbital Wars is, except for this version, it's going to be more live. The Orbital Wars was kind of a basically, it was online, but it was a isolated session. So you never, the whole point of the PvP is you never really competed against someone like counteracting someone putting a tower down or someone counteracting putting a tank down. This is the kind of PvP that I want to do, and so I think that's what we're going to go with. Plus, we can use things like timing between players. We can kind of do syncing. It's not going to be game changer if we don't get it right, but we'll throw that in there just for practice to kind of step toward a first-person shooter. It won't be first-person shooter level, but we can get there a little closer. So I think that's what we'll do. Anyway, RPCs have to be on the client and the server identical. Just the RPC functions though. So it does not have to be all your functions. You can have functions inside of like the connection interface. So when a player connects, we have connection signals and functions that get called. Those don't have to be identical on client and server. What does have to be identical is these functions here. Okay? These have to exist on the server and the client. If they are not called, as you can see here, what I do is I do client validate token. So this is the client calling the server, sending the token during login. Then the server will say, call back, call this function remotely, and pass the code, okay, whether it passed or failed. So, and then what I do is, because these are dummy functions, this will cause an issue if you put it, if you put a full name here, it's going to warn error, unused, whatever. So what I do is I just take, if you do an underscore, the warning goes away. So then they kind of let you know that, oh, this is on the other side, not this side. It's kind of how I've done things. Messaging interface, a little bit bigger. We got block player functions. We got report player functions, which really doesn't do anything right now, but, and then do block for blogging or unblocking. This function is called on the server, and then we'll run that. We'll go through the server code as far as the DB calls, because that's kind of probably more important, but I just want to do a light touch on the client. Okay. All right. So far, we just have our scenes are the login, which is always the main. I always put this as the main because it's the main screen that you're going to see whenever anybody opens up the client. So I always put that just at the bottom. I mean, technically, I guess you could put it in scenes, put it in here, but it's always the first one. It's like either main, if it's a server, or login, if it's a login, or whatever. If there's not a login, maybe it's just a entry point to, start a game, whatever. And then I put all my other scenes under the scenes here. So we have a login. When login succeeds, it will then launch the lobby, take us to the lobby. And of course we have little utilities. We have the message line TSN, which is basically the scene, which is just, this is what contains the message. You won't get good UI from me. That's not what I'm good at. So you can do probably better than I can, but this is how I set it up. You can make it pretty. Maybe at the end of this tutorial series, I'll hire somebody to write me up a good UI, and we can make it look good. Maybe we'll turn this into an actual online playable game. We'll see. Anyhow. So that's what the message line's done. So that just gets inserted into the lobby scene here. So So we get that's the block. These are pop-ups for the block player. So report player messaging and stuff, whatnot. And then so here we do the insertion of the messages. All right, so this is the message scroll container right here. And then we have the message here, and then this gets added to the message. That's this section here, so the messages keep getting added here. And then we have another HBox container that holds the line, and we set it up to where if you hit enter, it'll send the message, or if you hit send, it'll send the message. If you have any questions, comment below or go on Discord. All right. And that pretty much does it for the client. We may want to add some sanitization later, more than what we've got. I think I've added some sanitization here, but we may want to add more in the future to prevent them from sending, a username and password that doesn't really work. But we'll worry about that later. Anyway, on to the game server. Go ahead and skip forward. Okay, standard DB stuff, just like the auth server, except for different login user. Password's the same. We're just gonna keep it a secret. Again, I highly suggest on your servers you change this to something more appropriate. I went ahead and included the SHA 512 hex, and then I did the conversion. And you can do that on a website. So you take the secret password, and you can go to go to SHA 512, right? Find a place that does SHA 512. You put in your password here. Right, and there's your hex code there, right? So if you look here, the BD2B1AA, right? Same one here, and then you just run this through a base64. So take this hex, run it through base64. You don't need the plain password and the SHA-512 in the JSON, so you're going to want to delete them. They're only there for reference to show you how it's done. As you can see here, we only access the base64. The DB, as we did before in the authentication server, I did make changes, so please take a look at those and the compare in your GitHub, because I made things a little bit more thread safe. There were some issues in calls that don't quite work. So instead of calling the function, I went ahead and just put it in a continuous loop. While server running, it just goes through. It just keeps running. And then at the bottom is a semaphore. And if you don't know what a semaphore is, basically a semaphore has a wait and a post condition. So before, what I was doing is had a signal that would run this directly, and let's go through and run this based on the signal that was called. Now what I've done is I've just put a post on the semaphore. So what will happen is runs this function, it'll sit here and wait for this post from a signal gets called, and just keep running. This is the best way to do it. It's more thread safe. You don't have to worry about being on the root or being in a thread, the main thread. All right, and then everything else is pretty much the same as the authentication server. Scenes, I got map in here, but again, we're not doing that yet. These are just preemptive thoughts that I was kind of running through and adding stuff as we went, as I was thinking about them. We get the player container, and of course the player container gets added. So let's cover that real quick. So we have a server, and the server is going to be the back-end server. This is what the gateway communicates to the game server. So when the gateway's logged in, or the user gets logged in, so they go through the gateway, goes to the authentication server, verifies, comes back, the gateway server creates a phrase, basically, that is passed to the server, and basically we've already covered that in the gateway, what happens, and that gets passed to the client and gets back to the game server, right? And then so this gets passed in. It's just a connection from the gateway. It's listening all the time, waiting for that gateway server. And then we run our functions. We then add the connection to the player connection to the connection interface. So this is the waiting login. This would be a dictionary, and then we just give it a token. That way it's easier to look up, because we create the token, created base64 string, concatenate them together. We add this into the dictionary with the player ID, the display name, and then when it expires. So that way the server is always checking, going through these awaited logins and checking the expiration time, and if it expired, then it just drops the connection completely out. Okay. Let's go to the RPC, the connection interface. A lot of code here. And then we have our matching RPC functions down at the bottom. I kind of put everything down to bottom. I try to keep it alphabetical order. I think this is not in alphabetical order, but I'll probably fix it later, because we're going to probably add a lot more to this. All right. These are dictionary. So I created a player's online dictionary, just so it makes it easier for the gateway, and we can kind of run through. We can do things like load balancing, things like that. I just kind of preemptively put this stuff in here. The waiting login is the one that we're more worried about right now. All right, and we go check waiting. Whoops, it's spelled incorrectly, but that's fine. Then we have a thread again. I always do everything on threads. It's just more efficient. The main thread will only take one thread of the core in Godot. You have servers, and they are done through thread pooling, and they can be done on a separate thread, which can then run on a separate core. However, the main thread is always on one core all the time. So if you have a 6-core machine, if you only do everything on the main thread, you're only going to access the main thread. Some of the back-end server stuff, like maybe the physics server might use it. I'm not sure exactly. But for the most part, if you pay attention to your threads, you'll see that they don't run. They only run on the one thread. If you only, very rarely do they run on multiple threads. So in this case, we're taking advantage of threads. Plus, beautiful thing about threads is you can pause it without pausing the main thread. If it's got to process something, do something, wait for something, like especially with TCP, so you're waiting for 40, 60, 100 milliseconds between the client and the server communication. That's just sitting there idle waiting. Why not have something else do something while it's waiting for that? If you do everything synchronously, it will just make things slower. So I do everything in threads. Even stuff to the database calls. So like when we're doing connections, I'll pass that off to a thread if I can. The connection stuff you can't, so like the multiplayer connections, so when you communicate through RPC, you cannot do that through threads, but you can hand off what the process is through threads. So you can make that distinction. Okay. I think that covers it. Messaging. We have the same thing. We're talking the messaging, the interface, and we have a player sent message. So basically what this does is signal, and then we have a player that connects to this signal. So when a message is sent, all the players will take that signal and they'll do their own RPC call. So instead of going through every single player on the connection list, the players basically handle the connection themselves. Okay. Go to player script. Okay. So we connect, sent message, and then the SOS message comes in, which is the connection to send a message. All right, so it goes through here. And we keep track of the block players here. So I call it message block players. And again, I change this. Instead of doing the colon equals array, which will technically be typecasting, but it takes an extra step to get what type it is to assign the type. This way it's faster. I've done some testing and it is truly faster. Here to send message. Okay. If it's not on a block player list, it'll send the message to that player. So it gets this pure ID, which is here. So what we've done is when the player successfully logs in, we create this container, set the pure ID, the player ID, the display name. Okay. We go fetch the block players from the database. Okay. And then if they're added or removed during the connection, we just directly affect this database. And then when we log off, we'll update the dictionary. That way we're not constantly pulling the database. There's no need to continuously keep pulling the database. We only need to update the database when the server disconnects. Now, we do want to put, eventually what we'll do is we want to put some kind of timing mechanism that will go through and update the player container. I'm not going to do that right now until we start doing inventory. Then we're going to want to at least update the server every couple of minutes. That way, if the server crashes, their inventory is updated. All right, but you don't want to constantly keep updating the inventory when we don't need to. This container is working with the player directly. There's no point in constantly updating the database. It's just doing database pulls for, we change quantity, right? It's of an item. We used an item. It's no longer available. We may want to update the database that way. That way they can't try to sell it or something like that. Those we might want to do, but we don't want to keep updating if they're not relevant to other players. So in this case, inventory is probably one of the things we just want to update every few minutes, depending on the item. Same thing with the message block players. We especially don't need to worry about this player container handles the message blocking. I think that does it. I may do another video on this once I go through and watch the video back and edit it and see if I've missed anything. But I think for the most part, it covers what we've done. If you got any questions, comments below. I have links to the repository. That way you'll be able to have the change. Okay, I have links to the Discord if you want to go join there, ask questions. I'm available most of the time. I do work from home, so it's not uncommon for me to just see a message in the Discord and go and chat and spend 5 minutes to talk about something if it needs to be talked about. I keep my hours flexible. All right. I think that'll do it for now. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.